I just wanted to offer a few thoughts on Pennsylvania to begin. Let's remember we have to be careful about making sweeping predictions, and we aren't even in full momentum on tax reform and the impact that it's having on bigger paychecks and more jobs for families all across this country. As the New York Times just reported in response to the February jobs report, the economy is humming and it's giving many Americans and their families reason to dream again. Because they have lowered taxes and we've repealed the corporate alternative minimum tax, Premera Blue Cross has dedicated $40 million to reinvesting in our communities. In Spokane, this is $1 million at Hope House. And Hope House is a shelter for women. And Hope House helps them find permanent homes. I recently visited Hope House, and I met many of these homeless women. And every night, Hope House has to turn women away. Because of tax reform, they're getting $1 million grant, and they're going to be able to triple their capacity. It's also a good reminder that $40 million in the hands of real people in our communities will go a lot further than if it was just sitting in Washington, D.C. This week, the People's House is also taking action to improve school safety. After the Florida shooting, I, as well as many other members, had the chance to meet with some courageous students from Parkland, Florida. And it's important that we do that following a tragedy, to sit down and listen to one another. I had a shooting in my district last fall at Freeman High School. And it's important to bring people together, school superintendents, law enforcement, community leaders. Our goal is to make sure every child has the chance to learn, make friends, and pursue their passion in a school that's safe. And that's why I am pleased, and we have Congressman John Rutherford with us today. He's former sheriff. He's been leading this effort in the House to make sure that our schools are equipped, that people are equipped to be able to prevent, recognize, and respond when there are signs of violence. And so I'd like to call up the sheriff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Before my remarks, I really want to thank all of the leadership for helping to shepherd this bill through to this point that we're at today. You know, during my time as sheriff, I used to always tell my community and my officers, I do not want to be the best first responder to a mass casualty event. I want to prevent that event before it occurs. And that is what our Stop School Violence Act of 2018 will do. This legislation is a result of some bipartisan work with Representative Ted Deutsch, my colleague from Florida, and a number of bipartisan members. But I want to recognize in a special way the parents and members of Sandy Hook Promise who have been integral in helping us to move this bill forward. And we began working with them back, I think it was last October. And so I thank them for all of their assistance. It's well known in law enforcement that security requires a multi-layered approach. And the Stop School Violence Act focuses on strengthening a very important layer to that security for our school. And there is still much work to be done, but the best way to keep our students and teachers safe is to give them the tools and the training to recognize the warning signs to prevent violence from ever entering our school grounds. And this bill aims to do just that. And again, I thank leadership for helping to shepherd this bill through. And
thank you.
Ms. Rogers?
Great.
I want to commend Sheriff Rutherford for his leadership in bringing forward a really strong bipartisan bill that focuses on addressing the real problem with mass school shootings. I'm proud to be a co-sponsor of the Stop School Violence Act, and you're going to see later today the House bring that bill up and pass it with a strong bipartisan vote. And if you look at what this bill does, it focuses on so many of the problems that we saw broke down. It's a shame that when so many of the students at the school knew that this shooter was going to go and do something like this, the system broke down. at the federal level with the FBI, even at the local level. And so what this bill does is actually give students, teachers, and law enforcement more tools to identify a mass shooting problem before it happens, because that is the real focus. And so Sheriff Rutherford's bill really does focus on addressing the problem in a serious way, and it's one more step that the House will be taking to confront this problem. I've met with a number of the students from Parkland. This morning, I actually met with another student from Parkland who was at the school that day, and we talked about the tragedy and the emotional toll and, and some of the things that they'll still have to be dealing with. And we also talked about what steps should be taken, and he's a very strong supporter of the Stop School Violence Act. And so I'm glad that we're continuing to address this problem. As we address these problems, we continue to also focus on getting our economy back on track. And we're really proud of the work that we did to cut taxes. 9 out of 10 Americans are seeing more money in their paychecks because of the legislation we passed to cut taxes. And I do think as we're talking about election results, it's real important to also talk about what would happen if Nancy Pelosi became Speaker again. And last week we got a really good glimpse of that. Because the Democrats laid out their alternative to our tax cut plan. And imagine this, just at a time when the economy is taking off because we cut taxes. We cut every tax rate for families, for businesses, enabling people to create more jobs, hire more people, pay higher wages to workers. The Democrats' plan that, of all people, Bernie Sanders, along with Chuck Schumer, presented last week, and they said if they get the majority, if Democrats get the House and Senate, their bill will raise taxes. It'll raise individual income taxes on families. It'll raise corporate taxes to slow business growth. And they go and they double down by jacking up the death tax even more. And they reinstate the alternative minimum tax, which is a tax that cripples middle-class families. So I think it's a great contrast to show that if Nancy Pelosi is elected Speaker, their plan is to take that money out of your pocket that 9 out of 10 Americans are enjoying right now, give it back to Washington, and raise taxes on hardworking families and businesses. So I think it's a great contrast to show people what is at stake this November as we continue to move legislation forward with this Republican majority to solve real problems, working with President Trump to get that job done.
Good morning. I do want to thank the sheriff. I know he's a member of Congress, but once he's sheriff, and if you've ever spent time with him down in Jacksonville, he knows almost every single person there, from the person that's handling the door on a first-name basis. But that also meant he knew the principals, he knew the students, and he knew the teachers as well. His bill that he's bringing to the floor today, that he worked with so many people, Student, Teachers, Officers Prevention Act, that he includes all to make sure that we never have this tragic situation again. I want to thank him for his work and the other members. As he mentioned, Sandy Hook Promise supports this bill, and I want to thank them for their work as well. I believe this will be a large bipartisan vote. It will not be the only bill, because in the Senate, we also have the work that this House did back in December, the National Instant Criminal Background Check. We saw in this situation, too, and just like in Texas, it needs to be fixed. So there'll be a number of bills sitting in the Senate, and we hope they can move something so we can become and make law. But I want to thank the sheriff for that work. Yesterday was a special day. Yesterday I got to meet Jordan McLinn. He is battling muscular dystrophy. Don't know if you saw him. He's actually down on the floor. Jordan and his mom, Laura, have never given up hope. They have devoted their lives to ensuring countless others have the right to try medication to save their lives, just as any other mother or child would want. Yesterday, we put legislation on the floor of right to try. We weren't the first. It passed unanimously out of the Senate. But the Senate wasn't the first either. 39 states since 2014 have approved right to try. In analyzing those 39 states, 96.9% of the Democrat state legislators supported right to try. That was 2,216. Only 72 Democrats in those 39 state legislatures voted against it. Out of 194 in our House, 140 Democrats said no. They said no to Jordan. They said no to Laura. They said no to all those Americans who would love to have that opportunity to try to save their lives. I don't know if it was because they were playing politics, because the president mentioned it in the State of the Union, because it wasn't that way in the Senate. But we will not stop. We will not look Jordan in the eye and say we stop because the Democrats want to say no. We will continue and we'll bring the bill back. I also want to mention one thing when we were gone. A lot of people talk about what did the tax bill do for America. I know those same Democrats that voted no on giving Americans the ability, right to try, they also said it'd be Armageddon, or it was just crumbs. So the jobs bills came out. The jobs report was pretty amazing, 313,000. But I think there's other numbers in there you should look for. When the last administration departed, the participation rate, that means how many people are actually participating in the economy, 62.7%. The lowest it has been since 1978. More than 800,000 have come back into the workforce. That's 800,000 individuals about the hopes, their ability to buy a house or send their kids to college. But a number also you wanted to look at, what about skilled labor? Those who are in construction or manufacturing. If you look at those numbers in the last 3 months, they are the best numbers we have had since 1984. Yes, we are starting the Great America Comeback, and we want to make sure it continues. I know those who believe it would have been Armageddon or crumbs, they're now proposing legislation to make the taxes go up. We want to make sure we finish the job that we started.
Well, happy St. Patrick's Week. Look, I admit, it seems like it was a long time ago, but you have to remember, we're just shy of 3 months of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act passing. So much has happened in those intervening 3 months, but it was only 3 months ago that this occurred. In this very short period of time, the success that we have seen as a result of this law exceeds our greatest expectations. What have we been seeing? We have seen utility bill savings in more than 40 states around the country. Over 40 states, because of the tax law, are lowering their rates for utilities. That's real money in paychecks, especially for the people who've been living paycheck to paycheck. We've seen more than 6 million employees receive bonuses from hundreds of companies. We've seen a vast majority of Americans have already seen bigger paychecks because of withholding tables have changed. So now people are opening the mail or going online and seeing that their paychecks are bigger as a result of this law. Now, we can add another tax reform effect to the list. Kathy just mentioned Washington State. Reinvestment in our nation's health insurance market is now taking place because of the tax cuts. This week, Premier Blue Cross Blue Shield of Alaska, the state's only private insurance provider, announced that it would reinvest $50 million of the tax savings that it received back into the state's health insurance market. How's that for an unexpected benefit for tax reform? So you got Blue Cross Blue Shield of Alaska saying because of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, we're putting $50 million back into our state for health insurance. There's more good tax reform news every single day. Yesterday, the National Federation of Independent Businesses released results from a new survey that found that for the first time since 2006, taxes received the fewest votes as the #1 business problem for small businesses. Let me repeat that. Our tax system is now helping, not hurting small businesses. So we are really saying, as Kevin mentioned, labor force participation. We're getting people who are not working, who are not looking for work, who are on the sidelines now getting up and going into the jobs market. So we're beginning to see people getting on the ladder of life because of the economic growth that is occurring, because of the higher wages, because of the new jobs that are being offered. So we're seeing phenomenal results from the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And it's just really a stark difference to me that not a single Democrat voted for this. And now they're saying they want to raise taxes and they want to void all of this great progress that we've made in our economy. I also want to thank Sheriff John Rutherford. Sheriff Rutherford, who is bringing the Stop School Violence Act to the floor today, deserves credit because he has taken his knowledge of local law enforcement as the sheriff of Jacksonville, Florida. And he has taken that knowledge and worked across the aisle with Democrats to make sure that we can advance legislation that keeps the Sandy Hook promise, that also advances the idea of making sure that schools are hardened and that schools are prepared and that everyone gets the necessary training that they need. This provides a multi-layer approach to identify the threats so we can stop the violence before it happens. It includes new violence prevention training for our law enforcement, for students, for school personnel. It implements additional technology to improve school security and so much more. Tragic violence has no place in our schools. Every American believes that. This legislation will actually take concrete action to prevent that. And I'm very excited that we're bringing this bill to the floor today. Questions?
Thank you. Good morning.
Morning.
What, win or lose in Pennsylvania, what is the surprise for you about what happened in that race?
I don't know that there's a big surprise. Win or lose, as you say, it's too soon to say what's going to happen. I think the candidate that's going to win this race is the candidate that ran as a pro-life, pro-gun, anti-Nancy Pelosi conservative. That's the candidate that's going to win this race. So this is something that you're not going to see repeated because they didn't have a primary. They were able to pick a candidate who could run as a conservative, who ran against the minority leader, who ran on a conservative agenda. You will have primaries in all these other races, and the primaries bring them to the left. So I just don't think that this is something they're going to be able to see a repeat of.
Yeah. What's your message to your candidates, all your incumbents who are going to be out and running, so that they don't get caught sleeping, essentially?
We have a great track record. Look at what's going on with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. I think focusing on the accomplishments we have and how it's improved people's lives, I think is something that we should be focusing on. Also, we've got more work to do, and we're in the middle of negotiating a budget agreement or an appropriations that will finally rebuild our military, that will make good on our promises to fight the opioid epidemic, to help find a cure for cancer, to make a good down payment on the president's infrastructure agenda. So there's a lot that we've done, there's a lot that we're going to do, and there's a great record to run on.
Mr. Speaker, at this very hour, there are thousands of students who are participating in a national walkout in honor of the Parkland victims. I think a lot of them would agree with the school safety bill that you guys are putting on the floor today, but they also want some kind of gun control or gun restrictions along with that. What's your message to them on this day?
I'll echo what the majority leader said is, we passed in the House legislation plugging the loopholes in the background check system. Look, we believe that the best focus can be on stopping people who should not get guns from getting any kind of gun, period. We sent legislation to the Senate in December. Hopefully the Senate can act on that legislation. In the meantime, we believe that we can make great progress on the Stop School Violence Act, which we're passing today.
If both candidates in Pennsylvania ran on the same agenda, why was the Democrat able to push through on a plus 20 Republican?
I won't speculate on the outcome of that, only to say that.
There's more Democrats in that district than there are Republicans.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's
If
right.
you take the registration, there are many.
There are more Democrats in that difference than Republicans. That's exactly right. And both of these candidates ran as conservatives. I just don't think you're going to see that across the country.
Last question, but on Pennsylvania, I don't need to remind you that this is a district
Yeah,
that
you
Trump
don't-
won by 20 points. If it is truly a wake-up call, as we understand you told your members this morning, isn't it also a wake-up call for the role the president should play, in your opinion, in the upcoming midterm?
Look, I think the president helped close this race. I think you saw the public polling. The public polling wasn't looking so good, and the president came in and helped close this race and got it to where it is right now, which is, within a few hundred votes. I think the point that first of all, we need to execute, we need to get our message, and we need to make sure that our candidates aren't massively outraised and outspent on TV, as was the case between these two candidates. But second point I'd say is both of these candidates, the Republican and the Democrat, ran as conservatives. Ran as pro-gun, pro-life, anti-Nancy Pelosi conservatives. And I think that's the takeaway we see here. I'll still take one more. Go ahead. Well, you're still, okay, anybody, yeah. No, go ahead. Look, you guys, is there anything else you guys want to talk about? Anna. I want to give one more because I'm sure there's other topics you guys want to talk about. I did call on you.
On the omnibus, I understand you told the conference that will be filed tonight. Can you confirm
Well, I
that?
didn't say that was a conference meeting, so obviously what leaked out of the conference wasn't an accurate portrayal. I said our goal is to get this done as fast as possible. Stay tuned. Okay, Anna, go ahead.
So I was wondering if you support Christine Noem's proposal for an online sales tax, and if you think that proposal has a place in the omnibus.
I'm not going to speculate as to the contents of the omnibus because it hasn't been done yet. The appropriators are still negotiating it. I'll leave it at that.
But do you support the online sales tax?
Thank you.